Hi everyone, so I picked up this PlayStation 3 at the thrift store and it doesn't work. It has an interesting issue which I think is easy to fix, and that is when you switch it on it beeps 3 times and sometimes you can hear the hard drive go clunk. Sometimes it even boots. Pay attention to the status light here. So here we have the motherboard and the heat sinks, and you can tell it looks a little bit dried out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some rubbing alcohol and I'm going to clean these off, and then I'm going to clean these off, and then I'm going to install the shims, and I'm going to put a layer of compound. I'll go over this. So I'm going to put a layer of compound on this, then the shims, and then another layer of compound. The guide also suggests to use some of this flux underneath here and then heat the whole thing up to quote-unquote reflow the board, but which I'm going to do. But it's interesting, most of the videos online suggest you can use a hairdryer, and correct me if I'm wrong obviously, but I'm pretty sure a hairdryer is not hot enough to actually reflow solder. And on the flip side, I kind of don't want to use the heat gun just because you know, surface mounted reworks are just difficult. But once I have this cleaned up though, I can kind of go over the board as well and explain exactly what all these chips do. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a paper napkin. I'd like to use a cotton ball, but I don't have any on hand, and just soak it in some isopropyl alcohol and rub on this until it comes clean. You can see it working pretty well there until these are totally polished, and yeah, it feels really dry. So on the left here we have the GPU, and on the right we have the famous cell processor, and looks like right here we have an Ethernet controller, and not sure what this is. CXD, maybe IO. We have a voltage input from the power supply, some inductors for, you know, voltage conversion, a bunch of memory, another custom chip, CXR 714120. And then we have a silicon image. I think this is the HDMI driver, and I'm gonna guess this is has something to do with the RGB output. This actually supports composite and RGB modes, which is kind of neat. And some more memory, and then in the back we have a bunch more memory, and there's the bypass caps for the CPU. So the guide says to drip the flux down through the BGA array, which I'll do. Hello, cat. And then do it to the GPU. All right. And most people online are using one of these things. Like I said, it's not actually powerful enough to flow solder, and I usually use this for heat shrink tubing. But that's what most people are using, so I'm going to try it out, see if it goes. And I'm going to move all the plastic stuff out of the way, and we'll switch it online. Or switch it on, rather. And of course I'm going to clean all the old compound off of the heatsink side, the existing heat sinks. And what worries me a bit is there's, if you can see that, there's a bit of a relief there. I'm not sure if that will, it looks like it will fit. I'll put the cover back onto it. Will it fit? Yeah, it will. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is take the motherboard, and I'm going to use the putty knife and spread some heatsink compound onto the existing chip. And you don't need, you know, in my experience, you don't need to have a whole lot on there. Just enough to cover the whole chip. Okay, so I've lined up the shims, and now I'm just going to flip the board over this way, like so. It lines up with the ports, and slide it back in. And then I see that it lines up with the screw holes, which go under this thing. And that's pretty much it. All I need to do now is reassemble the machine and test it out, see if this all works. Alright, so that's the cover back on. So just a pro tip about these is that if you go back and forth on these, eventually you'll find that there's really no more torque to give them. You just cinch them down until it's nice and, you know, tight. So it's pressed right up against the GPU and the CPU. And then another pro tip I found is some of these have a M on them, and that means they're machine screw. And what I found is that it's kind of a mixture of self-tapping plastic screws and machine screws all the way around here. But the ones that say M are the machine screws. These little guys here, they just go right in. And I usually back the screw out until I hear it go click, and that way I know the thread's perfectly lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this all back together. Okay, so I've had it running for a couple hours now, and it seems just fine. It hasn't crashed or locked up or shut off because of overheating. And I've actually finished all the way through the first Ninja Gaiden boss. So I think the machine's just fine now. It seems to work just fine. I did try playing a PlayStation 2 game on it, and it doesn't want to do that. And for some reason I thought the fat PlayStation 2s, PlayStation 3s could play PlayStation 2 games, but I guess they can't. Otherwise, works pretty well. So not bad for a thrift store broken PlayStation 3. I do notice that it does occasionally spin the fan up. You can kind of hear it in the background there. And I did open it up again and clean all the individual fan blades, which helped a little bit, but I think this is the way to go. But it's still a somewhat noisy console. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Have a lovely Christmas. Bye-bye.